I want to reimagine church. I'm at all these places and people are like, oh man, just Sunday morning, people sitting in rows and just listening to a lecture essentially and stuff. Maybe there needs to be something different. It's like, well, what? Nobody knows. And I don't know either. And so there's something to be said for, I think, a pastor sharing something and that's fine. But I want to try to reimagine things a little bit, at least for this message series. And so I'm considering that things might feel a little different in this series than what it has been for the last 3 years of me trying to even learn how to be a pastor. Maybe certain Sundays they're dialogue. We're probably not going to get to anything too dialogue-y today. But even for those online, my hope is to have my laptop up here and actually have even the YouTube live stream up. And so if somebody wants a dialogue from the YouTube live stream, we can see, I can see comments coming up from there too. And so we'll be doing that. As we go through too, Solomon, there's a slide that says questions. This website, it actually allows you to set up questions. And sadly, the free version, it only allows you to set up questions for 7 days. So each week we'll have a code here. You can scan the QR code. You can also, if you go to the site, you can enter that code 206-3310. And you can put questions on there as well as we go through this. And so that way this feels like an engagement. And we can try to cover questions and engage on this. Jeremy, you threw me off. Like, now the room is weighted this way. You were over there. And so I was like, okay, we got people this way. So now it's like, okay, I'm good. Oh man. Where was I? Yeah, the questions. As we do this, I'm hoping for dialogue, submit questions during the week. And I really want this to flow in a different way and just to reimagine church, at least for a little bit. See what happens. This series that I want to go through, I'm picturing it as, I'm calling it blueprints. And that's just how I picture it in my mind. The idea of blueprints kind of comes out of what you're seeing with a lot of people who are deconstructing. And deconstruction, it's a construction term. They're tearing down the houses of their faith. And so we're going to go through this, and each Sunday, I don't know where I'll land. In fact, we'll just kind of run things and I'm start a timer. And so when we hit the time, we'll just say, hey, we'll pick up next Sunday. But Blueprints kind of looks at that idea that I don't think we're meant to be stagnant in our theology. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But I think as I picture my faith, it's been built on foundations that I'm unconscious of. And I've learned this as a homeowner of a fixer-upper. You're unconscious of the foundations until there's an issue with the foundation. and so we have these foundations, and a lot of it is unconscious things that we've built on. And we have our culture. We have whatever era we were born in and we grew up during our formative years. We have our friends and our faith, and it builds this foundation that we're living on, even though we're not even aware of it all the time. And then you have the actual house. It's like that's where you live, and that's my everyday life. And it's on this foundation. It rests on it, but I'm not really aware of what it's resting on so much, as long as my living space is doing okay. And my living space, I go visit my neighbors, and they have their own living spaces built on their foundations. And different people at different times in their life, you come over and sometimes the house is a mess, and they meet you at the front door of their living space, and that's where you get to engage with them. Other times they let you in the living room, but they're like, you can't see the bedrooms where we hurriedly tossed all of our junk from our lives into the bedroom to make the living room presentable. And yeah, don't come to my house right now. We got to throw everything in the bedroom really quick if you're coming over. No. Other times too, there's you see someone, they have a fresh house, just like in our own lives where something fresh happens. They're like, let me bring you on a tour, and you get to walk through the house, but you still don't always see every closet. There's something tucked away sometimes. And so I picture blueprints as kind of our theology in our life of foundations and the living space of the house. And then through our lives, there's remodels that happen. Remodels take place. My parents recently, they were looking at doing a remodel in their house. And it's interesting how some remodels, you're like, I can tack this onto what I have. It fits with what I have, and it's going to be an addition. And it kind of tacks on. Other remodels don't work so well like that. And so as my parents explored their remodel in their house, and I got a chance to see kind of what, my dad's exploring this and different things. And it's like, man, this remodel is going to require going to that unconscious foundation. And we're going to have to make some changes to the foundation to then change where we live. And so there's certain things that I think come to us in our theology that we're like, oh, we got to do some foundation changes. And what you're seeing with a lot of people is things come into their living space. And they realize their living space isn't able to fit what's come into the space. And in deconstruction, they just raise the house. But not everyone's been taught to then rebuild. And so sometimes, like, as I've seen my parents work with their remodel, and as I've seen people in different neighborhoods, sometimes you just raise the whole house and you start from scratch. And it can be scary. It can be scary to do that. But sometimes remodels require that. So this is blueprints, and it's plural because we don't live in cookie cutter houses. Our lives are so unique that I'm not saying here is the blueprint and now I will show it to you. And now we're going to live in our little suburban cul-de-sac of identical houses. That's not what this is. And so I've pictured this as blueprints. And each person gets to look at this and be like, okay, where does my foundation change for what I want to add? Sometimes you go to someone's house and you're like, that's an amazing idea, what they did to their house. I want to bring that to my house. Other times you go to someone's house and you see what they did and you're like, it's beautiful. And you're like, I would never do it. And so there's certain things that you're like, that's never coming to my house. Like, I'm not going to do that. And so it's blueprints, it's plural, it's personal. And I'm excited. And for today, we'll see where we go, but we're going to scratch the surface and just consider some initial thoughts on where this whole series is going to go. This series is born out of a recent trip that I made to Dallas. It was a chance for me to get away, and I knew I needed to get away and just rest for a bit, because in my own life, I knew my wife may differ with me on the minimizing term, but I was a little snappy sometimes, and I was struggling to have the bandwidth for everything in life. And so there was frustration and like what I feel when I drive on 217, that was like going into other areas of my life. And so I was like, I need to get away. And I went to Dallas, and it was a rejuvenating time. And my ADHD, Solomon, can we go to blank on the screen? Because I'm also looking at it. It just, my ADHD is like, oh, that slide still. So I go to Dallas, and I'm like, okay, God, this is going to be a phenomenal time. I anticipate, I know this is going to be you and me time, God. And I go to Dallas, and I land on a Thursday, and I'm going to this little conference that I'm like, I get to sit, and I get to be poured into. I get to just take. And we go, and I land on Thursday, and first thing, my Uber driver, amazing guy. And I'm just like, God, this is exactly what I was talking about. This is meeting my expectations. Thank you. And so get to the hotel, and I get it. The next day, I'm resting. The conference didn't start till 4 p.m. So it's a great day of rest. I read up on some stuff that I wanted to read because Julie Stoa was jumping in for me that Sunday. And so I'm not stuck trying to make another message every week. And I'm like, I get to read something for myself. And so I'm reading some stuff, and 4 p.m. comes around, and I'm like, all right, let's go to the conference. And I had these emails. I confirmed the conference was at this hotel where I'm staying. And I go down to the conference room, and the conference room is empty. I'm like, this is where it's supposed to be. And I'm like, okay, small conference. Somebody got sick. Somebody's running late. It's okay. I'll have grace for them in their sin of being late. And 4:05 comes around, and I like to be a punctual person, and I'm like, they're not punctual, and so I go out to the front desk, and I'm like, is there a conference here this weekend? And the guy's like, no. And I'm like, what? And immediately I start, half of me starts bashing myself. I'm my own worst enemy. And I'm like, you idiot. You messed the whole thing up. You just spent hundreds of dollars and you flew into the wrong town. Why are you so dumb? And so I'm bashing myself. Part of me frustrated because I'm like, they miscommunicated. And so my temperature is increasing and my heart rate is going higher. And I'm like, okay. And so I'm trying to figure this out. And I pull up the email and I come over and I'm like, is this your address? Yeah. I'm like, there's no conference. He's like, no. And so I go sit in the hotel lobby. And at this point, my face is red. I can tell it's hot. And I'm just like, oh, and I'm just upset. And for the clearest moment, for 3 times in my life, I've heard the voice of God clear, more direct than I've ever heard it. First time I heard it was when I was in my 30s and I got saved, converted, if we're going to use the religious term. And he spoke to me of his love for me just directly, and my life changed. Second time in my life that I've heard the voice of God in that way was when I said, I'm absolutely not going to be a pastor of a church. And God's like, give it a try. And so here I am. Third time I heard it was down in Dallas a few weeks ago. And I'm just sitting there stewing and first hear God say, you're so excited to give me this weekend, right? I was like, yes, but it's all messed up. And I hear this voice say, if you gave me the weekend, why are you mad? It's not your time to be mad about anyway. Oh. And I didn't feel guilt. There's no condemnation from God. It was just this invitation to say, if you gave me this time, you don't have to carry it. You don't have to be angry over it if it was my time. Let me work with it. If you said this was going to be our weekend, let me work. Okay. The physiological responses, though, are already well on their way of stress. And so it's one thing to say, okay, it's another thing to lower blood pressure, to take some deep breaths and to calm down. And I'm like, okay. And so I'm trying. And the voice says, check your junk mail. And so I look at my junk email, and every email from the coordinator of this conference had come to my inbox. There'd never been an issue. The one email that went to my junk mail was the email that said they had to change venues. So I look, and it's at a hotel about 15 minutes away. And then I'm like, so I'm not even staying at the right hotel. And so I order an Uber. Uber at this point now, it's like 4:20 and it's getting on near rush hour. Uber takes 10 minutes to get to me. It's 15 minutes to get to the hotel. So another 25 minutes. And I'm like, this conference was my weekend and I'm missing the first part of it. So I get to the conference and it was amazing. And it was God said, like, it did not meet my expectations at all. And that's actually what I needed. God knew what I needed. And it was completely different than what I thought. And God's voice just was speaking to me. And even during their Uber ride, the Uber guy is probably like, this guy's going to kill me because I'm in the back like, lower my blood pressure. And God's like, you don't have to be angry when it's mine. When you've handed it to me, let me worry about it. And I'm like, okay, I'll work on handing you the weekend. And then God was like, and you know something that's cool? You said you gave me your life. You don't have to be angry about anything if it's been handed to me. Oh, crap. And so it was an amazing weekend. And one of the messages I heard from God that weekend is, I'm a nerd. I love information. And I love sharing information and sharing thoughts. But what I heard from God is, share me as you know me. Not share me as you've studied me, but share me as you've experienced me. And when we come to year 4 of the church, I felt like God gave me, I talked to the church board, the council about this. I've talked to a few other people about it. Felt like God gave me 3 years at Dallas, that was the 3-year week. And I'm like, I'm coming up on the end of 3 years, God. Like, I felt like God had given me a 3-year idea. I'm like, what's year 4? And I was kind of hanging out there like, I don't know. And this week in Dallas, I felt like God said, share me as you know me. Not share me as you've studied me. Share me as you know me. And I felt like God said, you're beginning to year 4. I'm like, okay, let's do it. And so we've heard Matthew tell us about how he experienced Jesus, how we've heard Matthew talk about God as Matthew knew him and walked with him and had heard about him. And so now I want to introduce you to the God I know. In this sermon series, I want to introduce you to the God as I've experienced him. And I want to make space in this for you all to hang out with God too. God doesn't have grandchildren. And so I can't give you the answers to faith. And then you'd be like, yeah, I'm following Jason's God really, really well, and he's giving me a lot of answers. And so Jason's God is great. You can't be my grandchildren. You can't be someone else's grandchildren, as in you're a degree removed from God. I have to introduce you to your God. If I want to help facilitate it and make encounters happen. But at some point, you have to be able to say what we heard Jesus say at the end of Matthew. My God, why have you forsaken me? He experienced the separation from not the God, a God, the Hebrew God. It was his God. He owned God. And so, yeah, I want to bring you to explore your God for each of you. And along the way, at the bottom of the cover of this thing, it says fully human. I want to explore what it truly means to be fully human. We were intentionally made as human beings. We'll explore it in the coming weeks, but there is a single humanity of which Scripture says we are all individual expressions, unique humans. But we come from a collective humanity with a singular nature. It says God made humanity in his image, male, female, the group. But it comes from the singular nature that God made. And so, yeah, so we're going to look at this in the coming weeks. And I'm not here to guarantee you answers. I don't want this to be an answer course. Some of this stuff in the notebook, there's a page of concepts, a page of terms, and I've introduced you to a couple. We'll go through a couple more, but a lot of it's blank. What do you want to put in there? What comes up over this that you want to fill in the rest of the stuff with? And we'll explore as we go. One of the ideas that came to my mind as we went through Matthew's gospel is I realized as there's a conversation about what is church meant to be, what could church be reimagined to? Maybe we've gotten discipleship all wrong. And maybe because we've gotten discipleship all wrong, maybe we've gotten pastoring wrong. And as Jesus, as he leaves off in Matthew, he says, go and make disciples now. And it's not go and do it differently than I did. He says, I've shown you how to do it, up to and including laying down your life for someone in love. Now go do what I've done. And I wrote down some thoughts about, well, what is discipleship according to what we just looked at the Gospel of Matthew, what Jesus did? Well, discipleship was creating more questions than giving answers. It was speaking in parables to offer someone tools to gain their own wisdom than it was to give them memorization keys. And priority number one of Jesus' discipleship, after I make you question, after I give you complex things that you're like, of course we're getting it, Jesus. And then behind the scenes, they're like, we're not getting it. What Jesus always let them know, priority number one for Jesus was what matters first is that you know you're loved. Even if you don't have it right yet. We came to the end of Jesus' time with his disciples, and his lesson was, I want you to see that you're at the table of love with love itself. God is agape. God is love. And he first demonstrated, and I think this is the key to discipleship, he demonstrated that you love always. You love your oppressor, soon to be facilitator of your death. And you share a bowl of food with them, the Judases of your life. You love the one who's going to deny you multiple times. And to your face, he's going to tell you, I'm not going to deny you. He's going to deny to God's face that God doesn't know him well enough to know he's going to deny him. And yet he says, I'm going to share my table with you. He's going to share his table with the unfaithful. And he's truly going to live out what we read, that even when you're faithless, God says, I'm faithful. And he says, because they can't be any other way. That's discipleship that Jesus showed. And as I carry this into pastoring, as I've seen how Jesus modeled pastoring, he always put God before people's eyes so they could see God and experience God, not follow someone else's God as they've been handed the answers, but they're given a chance to experience God. And then, for the sake of time, just one of the ones that I just jotted down about pastoring was he managed to show 12 different sheep on 12 unique paths that somehow the love of God encompassed all their paths. He showed a love that gives space, a love that has room for where we are currently, but also a love that leaves room for us to grow and change. So I want to carry that into pastoring, and I think there's a freedom that comes with love, and the freedom is that I've discovered, the freedom is that I don't need any of you to believe like me. But I want you to meet the God who loves me. And there's a difference there. But I can give freedom once my identity doesn't hinge on fixing others so that we all have the same flaws, then I'm free. And when my identity doesn't even hinge on fixing myself, then I'm free. A big one for me was that when my identity no longer hinges on having answers, and I get to say these magic words, I don't know. And it feels so freeing. I don't have to come up with all the answers. My identity is no longer in what I know. It's freeing. And when my identity is no longer tied to people having to agree with me, and seeing differences in opinions, differences in experiences of where we are in life at the time I'm meeting someone, where they differ from me is no longer perceived as an attack upon me. And we get to coexist in love. An idea that came out in the Reformation that I think may have been lost. We look at the Reformation and there's so much scholarship that goes into the Reformation and Calvin and these big names that helped change the church. But there was this phrase that I think was lost in the Reformation, and the phrase was reformed and always reforming. It was meant to keep going, always be changing, and as you consider, like, man, I still have so much changing to do. It keeps you humble. And it leaves room and time and space for others when you realize, and they need to change too. And they will, as God walks with them. I don't have to fix them. John Wesley is a pretty cool guy, and we're going to get to some of his stuff later in this time. Over the weeks, we're going to get to some John Wesley's stuff, but he was interesting. I think he had some great answers to some stuff, but the way he submitted his answers to people, one in particular, one publication that he made was like a Q&A. Like, these are the questions you've been asking me, and here's some of my answers. And he said, this is what I've been working on for 20 years. And here's where I'm at right now. But he humbly submits it, and he doesn't stay in it. He continues to evolve it for another 30, because he doesn't grow stagnant in where he was. He looks to keep changing. And in one of his publications, he submits these answers, and he says, here's my ideas on these matters. They're not intended to answer every objection. And they're offered with apprehension, because I don't know what I haven't figured out yet. And so he submitted them humbly. And he existed in this deep agape love. An interesting thing that you read in 1 Corinthians 13 is agape love doesn't demand to be recognized for being right. John Wesley lived it out. Jump to it really quick. I have a quote somewhere. Wasn't sure if I can get to it, but here's what John Wesley says. Though we cannot think alike, may we not love alike? May we not be of one heart, even though we're not of one opinion? Without all doubt, we may. Herein, all the children of God may unite. We can be of one love, even if we're not of one opinion. And I believe that the closer you get to the truth, and that's capital T, it's a person that is truth. It's not information. The closer you get to truth, I think the more you demand, or the more you demand less to be recognized as right. We'll go to one more and we'll wrap up here in a second. Before Wesley was Isaac the Syrian. In the higher churches, we're a gutter church if you didn't know this. There's higher churches. The Catholic Church, they're considered higher churches. We're gutter church. We're low church. In the higher churches, the ones that talk about saints and all that stuff, you very often get a saint in your life, and so you get someone that you recognize as like, I want to be like them. And if there's a saint that I want to be like, it'd probably be Isaac the Syrian. Super cool guy. And he said this. Someone who has actually tasted the truth is not contentious for truth. Someone who is considered among men to be zealous for truth has not actually learned yet what the truth is really like. Once he's learned it, he will cease from zealousness on its behalf. The gift of God and of knowledge of him is not a cause to have turmoil and clamor. Rather, this gift is entirely filled with a peace in which the Spirit, love, and humility reside. The following is a sign of the coming of the Spirit. That the person on whom the Spirit has overshadowed is made perfect in these very virtues. God is reality. The person whose mind has become aware of God does not possess a tongue with which to speak, but God resides in the heart with great sincerity. His experience is not stirring of zeal or argumentativeness, nor does God stir our anger. Isaac the Syrian said, the closer you come to truth, the less zealous you actually are for arguing. The more you want to love. I think I've shared in the past. The Apostle John is recorded as he gets to the end of his life. He was feeble enough that they had to carry him into church. And they would hang on his words. And they would wait for the Apostle John to speak. And week after week, all he would say is, my brethren, my sisters, love one another. And one of his apostles was like, why do you tell us the same thing every week? And he said, because everything else hangs on this. Love each other. We didn't get as far as I thought we were going to today. It's okay. We've got weeks to do this. I want to invite you into an experience. You can meet God. One of the ways that you can do it, we'll explore this. We'll explore this in weeks to come. I was talking with a couple people before church about it. Where God interacts with us is actually in our imagination. In our creative side. I was going to get to this, but we'll get to it next week, which is, how do we do theology? When I went through Bible college and I was taught how to do theology, the Psalms are one of the lowest priorities for theology. You don't do theology out of songs, the Psalms, poetry. You do theology out of where people have stated hard facts. The most quoted book of the Old Testament in the New Testament that is used to build theology is the book of Psalms. That's where theology is built. Because if God engages us in our right brain, when we are being creative, worshipful, writing poetry, when we're being creative, that's where we meet God the most. Psalms 110, if you're curious, is the most quoted psalm in the New Testament. A couple of those verses out of there. So God interacts with us on our creative side. That's where we experience God. In the Reformation, you know what, I just need to stop. We'll get to it next week. It's going to keep going. For now, what I want to invite you to do is try to get in touch with your right brain. It is hard sometimes. But if you'll join me in just closing your eyes. As I did this, you look for a place. Where does God want to meet you today? What is the place in your creativity that God will have you picture? My place ended up being a hookah lounge. For a lot of reasons that we'll get to next week, maybe. It wasn't where I thought it was going to be, but it just popped in my head. There it was, a hookah lounge. I'm going to invite you to consider what place would pop into your head as the safe place where love would reside with you. It might be in a green pasture. That's what David pictured. Other places that the Bible gives us is the warm protection of a wing. Scripture calls it just a secret place. It might be in a cave or a rock formation. It might be on the top of a mountain. It might be in the throne room of heaven. Where's a place that comes to mind that is safe for you? And all we're going to try to do today is, can you picture Jesus there with you? We've looked at him all through Matthew. How does Jesus come to you? As you're sitting there waiting and looking. It's interesting. Guy that I met, Brad Jerzak, down in Dallas. He lets people invite God in this way too. And he said that there's women who've been sexually traumatized by men. And when he has them invite Jesus to come into their place, a lot of times Jesus comes as a Labrador retriever. Because men are unsafe. How does Jesus come into your place today? Anybody want to share as Nate comes back and looks at their kids? Does anybody want to share? Like, what did a place pop into your head? You want to share your safe place? No. They're special. They're private. Oh, yeah. Jesus is your safe place. I love it. I love it. Yeah. Okay. You get to hold it secret. Sometimes, though, some of us are more creative than others. And so it is great sometimes to talk about it and share it, because then someone else, you're like, oh man, this is where Jesus met me. And someone else like, great, I drew a blank. Can I sit there with you? Would you loan your place to me? That's awesome too. Let someone loan their place to you. If it's a struggle, if it's difficult, don't neglect this. That's what I had to learn. You can make this a habit. You can return here during the week. You have a hard time. As you practice meeting Jesus here, you can get here more. And you can see him there. At the back of the notebook that I gave you, some of the process of walking through this is there. It's called the meeting place. It has the questions. It has stuff that you can consider as you go there. And we'll practice further. I want to bring us to encounter God. I'll leave you this question as Nate comes up. Theology. Theology comes from the Greek theos, it's for God, and logos, which is actually what they call Jesus too. Logos is word, and it's the words in Greek. And so it's theology, the way Paul Young put it, theology is just words about God. Technically, it's a study of God. That's how we've carried it out. Everybody has a theology. Everybody has words to say about God. Go out on the street and ask people, everybody will have a word to say about God. Question for the end of this week that we'll pick up next week is theology an art, or is theology a science? What I do know is that theology is full of